Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Ojeho.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are looking at match day 4 for the Canadian Premier League. A little bit of a shorter match day than we are used to. Only 3 games this weekend instead of 4. Not quite sure why that's the case. If anyone does know, please let us know, because we were discussing this as well beforehand. But still, 3 games with plenty of action, and we will dive into all of those details. But before we do, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, as well as on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, where you can see some of the visuals that we've created for every episode. And also drop a follow for Canadian Soccer Daily as we upload more and more clips from the show on their website. We're going to start with game number 1. It was pretty nice that there was one game every day. You didn't have to double up or anything. You just knew that you had to make time for that one game on the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So pretty nice in that regard. But we start with the Friday match, which was Cavalry against Vancouver FC. That one finished 3-1 in favor of Cavalry. 2 goals by Tobias Warchowski. Once in the 26th minute, his second one a penalty in the 60th minute. Charlie Trafford got an audacious goal in the 30th, running through the midfield. Vancouver got a consolation goal in the 81st, though, and sort of started a little bit of a wake-up for them, but too little too late for the team. Let's start with performances in the first half here, because the way that Vancouver set up, I was quite surprised, because the graphic that we have here from One Soccer is actually not correct. They weren't playing a 4-3-3. They were playing more of a 3-4-3. Paris G was pushed up as sort of a wing back. A little bit of a different look from Vancouver. After the game, Afshin Goppi said that was intentional and that he was experimenting to see if he could get some of the best out of some players in different positions. Mateo Campagna got his first start for Vancouver FC for his new side in this match as well. So it was on a little bit of an experimental side. It was a bold move to be able to try to switch things up so drastically against Cavalry FC, a very strong team in their own home, and I think it backfired a little bit. Cavalry started the game really, really well. I felt like Vancouver FC were just a little bit off the mark. They weren't playing with the same intensity and fluidity in the first, half an hour that we were used to in the first 2 games. And Cavalry really took advantage of that. There was a moments where Vancouver FC had some looks I believe it was like in the 8th minute. Moses Dyer was able to break through, and Bradley Kendham did really, really well to cover for I think it was Fraser Air,
wasn't it? That sort of died here, not knowing who was gonna do what, and Dyer really sort of pounced on the opportunity. But
exactly. And Camden did really, really well to stand them up and force him to make the first move and then be able to block it in time. And with that, he kind of showed that there are chances to be had against Cavalry. But for you, Mike, when you were looking at that first half, did you just feel like Vancouver FC were still lacking a little bit of that flair that we saw, and that's a really good, strong first half performances that we saw in the first 2 matches from them?
Yeah, there was. I think you got to give a lot of credit to Cavalry for that. I understand what you're saying. Afshin Goppi's tried this new formation, it's backfired, and I agree with you on that. But when you go to Cavalry and you haven't been on the best of runs of form, you've got to try something new. And he's given it a go, because Cavalry, we're looking at this team now, and we said it at the beginning of the year, like they've just added quality and depth. And they're very much a capable side to go on and repeat what they've done last year. With the squad they've got, it's absolutely fantastic. And we're seeing players now that have come in, Wachewski especially, like just quickly picking up what they're meant to do, what their role is in the team, and it's just been so smooth. And I think that's just what Vancouver struggled with in that first half. Cavalry really were they looked like the finished article. Whereas I think what we're seeing with Vancouver is a lot of promise, and it's not going to be smooth sailing for the whole season. Like they've got the quality in there. We've seen that in those opening few games, but it's not going to run like that every match. They're going to come up against these difficult challenges. And I like that Afshin Gotbi's tried something new. It hasn't quite worked, but you can see when you've got players like Dyer up front, you're going to score goals because he's just a handful. And it's just trying to work out. I think defensively that was, they were a lot weaker than what they had been in previous matches this season. I think they were, just didn't have the best game defensively, and maybe that was with the system change.
Yeah, I think there's always a thought that if you put an extra body in the defense going from a 2-back to a 3-back, you'll be more solid defensively. But I think we've seen also, with Halifax Wanderers, that that's not necessary. And Valour, that's not necessarily the case. And sometimes it actually makes things worse. And that's not to say that it was a complete capitulation from Vancouver. I think they were able to adapt, especially in the second half, a lot better. The way that they were playing in the last 10, 15 minutes, it felt like that was actually the Vancouver FC that a lot of people had been expecting after the first two matches. But the way that they began was, it was just concerning for me because it felt like they weren't having those crisp passes, those passages of play. And I think it is a lot to do with the fact that Cavalry are just such a tough side to play through. They're so physical. They're so aggressive. They will press you relentlessly. They won't allow you to have those spaces and to take a lot of touches. And I think Vancouver are still trying to figure out how to be that fluid consistently. And I think Cavalry were able to prey on that. And it didn't take long. Or at least too long for Cavalry to open the scoring in the 26th minute. Almost, would you say, kind of like a carbon copy of the goal in the Canadian Championship, maybe without the deflection this time. This time it was a good cross by Fraser at going all the way to the back post. And I called it, this was like Air Toby in this one, where it's just twice now that he just jumps over everyone and gets and is able to head it into the corner. Not much, I think, that Callum Irving could really do there. It's incredible to see that Tobias Wachowski now seems to be in a little bit of a good run of form here, and I think that's exactly what Cavalry were needing after the whole Meyer Bevan incident. They needed somebody to be able to step up and fill those big number 9 shoes. And so far, have you been impressed by what Toby's been able to do for Cavalry up front?
Oh, completely. Yeah, I mean, when the signing came in, we just assumed from the outside looking in, there you go. There's Meyer Bevan's backup. It's someone who's got a lot of energy, but he's someone who's going to push Meyer Bevan. Without him returning, like, this has been an absolutely incredible sort of replacement, because he's doing everything that Meyer Bevan did, but he's adding in the extra strength and the height, and he's building up play a lot better as well. He drops in deep and allows players like Ali Musi and Leighton Brooks, who got his first start, to sort of get in behind him. And so he gives Cavalry just an extra couple of different dimensions to their attack, just by himself being the kind of player he is. And he's definitely in some great form, like you said. And when it's coming over to the back post, no matter who's marking him, you're in for a really tough time.
Yeah, and I think having that kind of that big target man in the middle, having that focal point for Cavalry really helps out, because we know that Fraser Haird has really good delivery into the box. To be able to have somebody there that can get on the end of it and put that ball in really helps, and giving them a different dynamic. And their attack is not always just direct through the middle, or relying on the tricky players like Ali Musi or Willie Akio to be able to carve out those chances themselves. It can be as simple as put it to Fraser Aird, cross it to back post to Tobias Wachowski, and Wachowski can put it in, as he's shown twice now in a week. And then it didn't take much longer afterwards for Cavalry to make it 2-0. As Charlie Lionel Trafford decided to take it all on himself, something that I don't think anybody has ever seen him do. I don't think we've ever been privy to such a display from Charlie Trafford. Charlie Trafford is a very much proper, like, old style English midfielder, just very gritty, very tough, does the simple things well. He gets stuck in. Not one to really drive down through the middle and, dance past a few markers, but I mean, thankfully for Cavalry and their fans, it's perfect timing because I don't think that's exactly when you want to do it, when nobody's expecting it, when you pick up the
Yeah.
ball and you just start to drive forward. And fantastic goal, a deft finish too, just pokes it and puts it in that perfect place in the bottom corner, and a great goal by him, and then 2-0 inside, not even 40 minutes. It felt like Cavalry were in the driver's seat, and I think at that point I kind of was looking at the game as like, okay, Vancouver, how are you going to respond? Right? Like, it's just 5 or 6 minutes before halftime. What is that halftime talk going to be like? Because once again, they haven't been up to the races, and it felt like it was going to be, and evidently was, 3 straight losses away from home. Were you looking at that scoreline maybe at halftime and thinking this could get even worse for Vancouver FC, just the way that they were playing?
Yeah, and I mean, you said that there, Charlie Chafford, fantastic finish. But the thing that worried me the most about Vancouver and that I was really worried for how the second half could go, was the fact that Camargo plays a nice little ball around another player in the centre circle, and it gets to Charlie Trafford. But he runs from the halfway line and enters or approaches the 18-yard box, and not a single Vancouver player has done anything about it. The midfielders can't catch him, and the defense are just backing off and backing off and backing off. No one's engaging him at all, and they've just invited him along, which is like maybe they were thinking the same thing. Oh, Charlie Trafford's going to pass it in a minute, so don't worry. Like, they just carried on letting him run, and it was I can only imagine Afshin Ghotbi tearing his hair out and screaming at his players at half time for just allowing him to get in that position, not to take away from the finish. But watching that back a few times, you just look at the players coming in and think, a defender's got to step out to him at some point, and they just don't. And that really worried me for what we were going to see in the second half, because Cavalry were looking strong, they were looking confident, and lucky for Vancouver, they sort of stepped up a little bit when it came out in the second half, and it looks they must have got a bit of a rocket up them. I can only imagine from Afshin.
No, I can only imagine. Because, one of the things that Afshin's been saying now for the last week or so has been that he needs his team to stop having those lapses of concentration. Because they don't have any excuses anymore. Last season, when they had those, big lapses of concentration, you could excuse them because they were a brand new team with a bunch of players that have never played professionally, and they were just finding their feet in the footballing world. Now they have a bunch of experienced players that have played in the league before, but still they're having these lapses of concentration where, like Charlie Trafford, like you mentioned, fantastic goal, but he has no right to be able to do that. Somebody should be there to close him down. And the fact that nobody has, and nobody did so quick enough before he was bearing down on goal, goes to show that they just switched off. And they have periods where they switched off, and against teams like Cavalry, and even against teams like York United that we saw last time out, that they will punish you. And they need to be able to have games where they're more error-free. That's what Afshin said after the match as well. But going into halftime, it was a little bit concerning, especially, after the whole penalty incident that allowed a Cavalry side that was already kind of free-flowing the opportunity to go 3-0 in the 60th minute. And they could have had more, because Tobias Warchowski, he had that spinning little back heel off the post.
Lovely.
I forget. There was also in the first half as well. So it went off the post as well. And it was just like Cavalry had a bunch of opportunities, and Tobias Warchowski made it 2 and 3-0. And around the 65th minute or so, we started to see some changes from Vancouver. Some forced. David Norman Jr. unfortunately went down injured and was replaced with Elaj Ba. I think that was actually at the end of the first half. But we started to see some changes, and I think that was one of the silver linings for Vancouver was in some of the players that they brought on that actually gave them a little bit more of an injection, a little bit more energy. Particularly Grady McDonald, 16-year-old, came on and didn't look a step out of place. He was very, very clever on the ball, drew a lot of fouls from which the team was able to get the set piece opportunities, and that's what allowed them to get the goal in the 81st minute. He fought hard. His work rate was incredible. He tracked down runs to break down attacks for Cavalry, and again, 16 years of age was really, really impressive. Afshin Gotbi said afterwards that he was looking to get Grady into the mix at some point, and he was happy with his performances. But Thomas Powell came on as well, a U Sports draft player, impressed. Elaj Ba did quite well at the back in the second half after being called into. So they had performers that kind of showed it's like, okay, you do have quality off the bench.
Yeah.
Now it's finding out how do you get them more involved, maybe from the start or maybe earlier, so that you can have different profiles, different dynamics in the team and cater them to the different opponents that you have. Because while I do appreciate that Afshin Gotbi, rolled the dice in this game and tried a new formation, I feel like, again, Mateo Campagna started, Kembo Kibato, this was a second or third start, but it still was sort of the same thing. I think if you would have freshened it up maybe a little bit more, you might have been able to get something else from some of these players. But were you impressed by the second half showing from Vancouver FC with some of these players?
Yeah, I think what sort of rings out to me is like the end of last season, Vancouver had a really solid end of the season. With not too many changes. Then this season they start off well again with not too many changes in those opening games, and none at all really up until a few games in. And now it's trying to get these other players involved. They're also now having to go from, okay, we started off terribly as an expansion team. Things slowly got better, and now they've started well. And now we've hit a roadblock again. And this is the first time they're now having to really sort of change and adapt to the fact that, okay, we've been on a good run. Teams have figured out how to play against us. We need to make a few little tweaks and then we can get back in track. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing from Vancouver now. And they're having to manage that teams they're not going to just walk over, especially when they go away from home. They're not going to be putting in these performances that push the other team back so frequently until they learn to adapt and other players in this team get up to speed a bit quicker as well, and really start pushing the others for starting positions. I think, you've seen them live this season. You've been down there to the games when they've been on great form, so we've seen that they can do it. Like, we're going to see some of the Vancouver aren't going to go from an expansion team with such a terrible start and then just continue to then go and dominate. Like, it doesn't quickly change like that. There's going to be plenty of speed bumps along the way. Like, this is only year 2. So do you feel like, I'm still quite confident about this team, but there's just things they have to figure out as new teams do?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing would be finding a good formula away from home. Because I think it's a different environment. Obviously, you go in always usually as the underdog. You have the crowd behind the other team, giving them that extra edge. You need to be able to manage moments. I think, manage the first 15, 20 minutes, especially against a strong side. If you can survive the first 15, 20 minutes, start to grow into the game a little bit more. And that way you can have a solid second half of that first half. And then in the second half, you can try to go again to try to nick a result, a draw, maybe steal a win, especially against tough opponents like this. I feel like Vancouver's game plan and their game management away from home, as we've been seeing in the last 3 straight defeats, hasn't been great. And I think that's sometimes on the individuals because of these individual mistakes, because of these lapses in judgment, and sometimes also in the way that they have been set up and rotated in the match, or the lack of rotation, really.
Mm.
I think Afshin Gulby is still learning, obviously, with this brand new squad, almost
Yeah.
how to be able to tinker with it appropriately, and when to do substitutions, and when to be able to call upon certain players. I think, yeah, this is not. I don't think that the first two games were a fluke. I think that
Mm.
rather it's the first two games show what they're capable of. These last three games show that what they're still missing. And
Yeah.
now for the rest of this, early stage of the season, it's now up to them to be like, okay, how do we find that balance
Yeah.
between these two showings that we've had, and be able to really
Yeah.
kick on now and be a bit more consistent away from home as well as at home. So I'm
And they're
really
not,
interested to see their response.
sorry, yeah. I mean, they're not the only ones. Like for Halifax, Patrice Geyser's been in charge as long as Afshin Gotby has, and Halifax are having the same problems. It's not like it's unique to Vancouver. Like the travel in this league is tough. Like it takes a lot to deal with, and it takes a lot. You don't see many teams other than the sort of top teams be able to consistently manage this and put up good showings almost every time they go away from home. Like it is really tricky.
Yeah, no, generally there are some teams that make it look easy, not necessarily in this league,
Mm.
but in other leagues. But going away from home is always a tough ask, and that's something that Afshin said himself. It's like, go if you can get points away from home, if you can get 3 points away from home, that's usually a bonus, because of how hard it is to play, especially with all the travel and everything that's to
Yeah.
do with the Canadian Premier League. So we'll see how Vancouver respond, but I mean, Cavalry are starting to now, thanks to these games against Vancouver, are starting to get now into their form. We're starting to see really consistent performances across the pitch. Everyone seems to really know their roles. That all of the new players seem to have fit in now seamlessly. We talked about Tobias, but also some of the players like Leighton Brooks and Diego Gutierrez. Are
Mm.
you starting to see now Calvary kind of, maybe a little late, but now starting to be like, okay, this is why we're regular season champions? Are you expecting to be a bit more consistent in their performances from now on?
Definitely. And I think what we're seeing is I'm going to pick on Willie Akio, but not for any, not for any particular reason. It's happening across the pitch. Last season, players like him were almost undroppable because the players behind them weren't strong enough. Like Willie Akio has not had the best start to the season. He hasn't been as dangerous as we know he can be when he drives at other players. So Leighton Brooks has come in, and I feel like Leighton Brooks did that. So now it's a bit of a wake-up call to Willie Akio. And this is happening across the pitch. I don't mean to just pick on him because he's got the quality to do it. And now we're seeing like, okay, it's not like we're just throwing in someone and yeah, the level's not quite there. They've got it across the pitch, like wherever you look. And that's really seems to be sort of shimmering through the whole squad now of like, yeah, everyone's fighting for starting positions and we've got plenty of players who are very much worthy of it. So I mean, it's looking quite difficult for the rest of the league, other than maybe Forge, who seem to have their number no matter what.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Can't wait for another. Can't go in for another game. There has to be one where Cavalry get the leg up over Forge.
Yeah.
There has to be. But yeah, Cavalry, I think coming into form at a perfect time, because they have a tall order now, facing against the Vancouver Whitecaps across two legs, starting this week in Spruce Meadows, tomorrow, actually, at the time of recording.
It's coming so fast.
I know these games and the content is coming thick and fast. Yeah, we can barely keep up. So bear with us as we try to keep you up to date with everything that's going on. Let's move on now to the next match, the second match, which was Pacific FC against York United. This one finished 2-0 in favor of the home side. Goals by Rian Moore in the 15th minute and Max Ferrari, unfortunately, turning the ball into his own net in the 77th. Now, that is another game for Pacific with a clean sheet, and it's another victory for them. They're really showing their strengths in the early parts of the season, Mike. I think as impressive as their defense has been, this match showed that while their attack still isn't firing on all cylinders, it is at the very least improving.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Ali and Dom. I mean, we can talk about how juggling in defence and starting off a counter attack, but he's added. Yeah, you lose Didic. That is a huge loss, and Ali and Dom, like as a defender, out of possession, is obviously nowhere near Didic. He's still he looks like a midfielder in defence, but they do have that ability to now just sort of they can build attacks from the back and they can attack and counter attack in transition really, really well. And you're right, like look, this one again, 15 chances, only 4 on target. So there is still work to be done when it comes into that final third, but they've got the ability all across the pitch to like actually begin these attacks and get them started. It's just when they get into that final third and the clinicalness that you need in there, and the sharpness and the quality of the through ball and the finish and things like that. It's just not quite clicking still. But I mean, it's a really impressive start from again. But I guess home ties like last season. It's just a little less flashier than last season, but yeah, getting that sort of run at home does help them.
Yeah, exactly. The playing in front of your own fans, as we've seen with both BC sides, is a huge boost for them. But yeah, really strong first half from Pacific. They really dominated them. If you look at the stats, like the one that I have here, the 60% possession, 10 shots to York's 4, 3 on target to York's 0. They had the big chance, which was obviously Rian Moore's goal. They had more passes across the pitch than York. But what was really interesting is when you look at it, York had 94 passes in their own half. Pacific had 94 passes in York's half. So they had as many passes in York's halves as each other, which goes to show how just dominant Pacific were. That's not to say that York didn't obviously have chances. They did have a couple of chances in the first half, a couple of ones that I think really went begging. Brian Wright, as much as we praised him in the game against Vancouver, I felt like he was back to the old Brian Wright there.
That was a 2023 Brian Wright, wasn't it?
Yeah, the 2023 Brian Wright showed up. But Pacific, yeah, just dominant. And Rian Moore, a really good poacher's goal for him. Just you always want your attackers to be lingering, to be waiting, to be, anticipating any opportunity that might drop, especially off a set piece. And he did really well to round into the back post and just tap it in. And, it wasn't the flashiest of goals, but for him, that's another goal in his short career for Pacific after the goal against TSS Rovers in the Canadian Championship. And do you think now this might be the beginning of a little run for him? Obviously, I think he's still being a little bit isolated in the attack. They need to get him involved a little bit more. But I mean, if he gets one opportunity, scores, and he scores it, there's not much else you can really ask for in a striker, is there?
No, and yeah, getting those scrappy goals are important, especially after that miss against TSS Rovers before he notched his goal. It's just vital for it. Like strikers, like they're fueled with confidence. Like, and if they're getting a few little tap ins and they're getting a few little easy goals, and they look at their name on the leaderboard and for the golden boot and things like that in these early stages, like they're going to then start kicking on and they're going to start thinking, right, when they get into those positions, they're not going to be overthinking things. It's not going to become complicated. They're just going to finish. And yeah, from a Pacific point of view, Rian Moore's now getting those goals. He's getting his confidence, celebrating with some style afterwards. And that could be exactly what he needs and this club needs.
Yeah. I think if he can get a couple more goals under him, really build his confidence, in the same way we were talking about Tobias Wachowski, I think he will be able to help Pacific out, because we know defensively they're solid. They're the most solid team in the league defensively, because they have not conceded a goal, which is insane to say, in the first 4 matches.
Yeah.
But it's really, if can they get their attack firing, that's what's going to really push them on to be a real title contender. And if Rian Moore can start getting some goals, and maybe hopefully Dario Zanata gets a little bit more involved as well. He had an opportunity as well earlier in the game. I think there needs to be a little bit more chemistry, I think, in the attack between them. And like Josh Hurd, I think, is somebody that can probably complement that really well. He's somebody that can make things happen, and I think he can link the midfield to the attack a little bit more. I've been impressed by what Josh Hurd has been able to do for Pacific in their attack. But yeah, overall, a really dominant first half. Second half came out, and York did have a better half. They kind of pushed Pacific more. They had more possession. They had a few more chances. But Pacific's defense just was held strong. And not just the defense, but the midfield as well. Stephen Yates and Cedric Toussaint both really having stepping up to the plate in the midfield. One in the more sort of attacking creative role, fitting in for Manny Aparicio and Yates, and the other one as a more kind of like janitor, sweeping up, just cleaning up, not allowing too many attacks go right through the middle into Saint. How impressed have you been by Pacific's midfield and defense, not only across the 4 games, but in this match in particular?
Yeah, I think getting Dadaluke back is like for their defense has been important. La Jeunesse, we spoke about him at the beginning of the year, like before he got signed back, saying, "Well, there's a player they need to bring back," and I think he's been great. Like he's a really good hard-working left back. No frills, but just will get up and down all day long. Big guy as well, useful in the defense. And then when you look forward into that central midfield area, getting to Saint back was he's fantastic number 6. Really good. Complements Sean Young well. And they started off with Pierre Lamotte getting those starts early in the season. But I think Stephen Yates is really, of all the players in this squad, is doing the best he can to replace the void that Aparicio has left. I'm not saying he's the same player. I'm not saying he's as good as Aparicio, but he is really putting in these performances where he is starting to take control of games and starting to dictate things from the middle really well. So he's a player I've been really impressed with, and if he can continue to develop, could be really good in this, really good and really vital for Pacific this season.
Yeah. And I think that when you have a defense that is super, super solid, a midfield that is just dictating play and is good in possession, out of possession, you have everything that you need to be able to be a championship squad. It's just that attack. It's just that attack that needs to be firing a little bit more. But like, I think they can get that done, and if they can get some of those players up further up the pitch, getting some more goals and getting better connections, there'll be a serious side to contend with in the CPL. Changing gears now to York United, though. Second half, like we mentioned, it was a little bit better, but Brian Wright had quite a few opportunities. He had a free header. He had the chance after the long ball through. He had a shot from distance that just went wide. Probably should have had at least one goal in that match. But I feel like, yes, a lot of people can pin it on Brian Wright not taking his chances, but you look at a player like Mo Babuli, and if you really put him under the microscope, he's been, not to say he hasn't done anything, he's been influential. He's had created opportunities, but he hasn't gotten a single goal or assist. And I feel like York United, we talked about where are the goals coming from, in our season previews. I feel like I've expected a little bit more from a player like Mo Babuli, because he's the senior player, because he's probably the most talented player in the attack, to get more involved. The fact that he hasn't, I feel like, is part of the reason why York haven't been able to be as consistent. And whether that's on him specifically not performing, or whether that's the team not being able to get him more involved, I'm not quite sure. But I feel like he's sort of a catalyst in terms of York United not really being able to get things going in the attack. I don't know if you agree with me, or maybe you have a different, diagnosis for what's going on with York.
I do agree. With what you're saying. One of the things that I personally think, I'll be interested to see your thoughts, is if you're going to play Mo Babuli, you build your team around him as the 10, and you build your tactics around getting the best out of him. Because if you're going to play Mo Babuli and put him left wing, you're going to have problems. We saw so often how he doesn't track back very often. He'll do it once or twice maybe, and he'll throw in a tackle, and then he won't do it for 5 or 6 times when he gets beaten, and then he'll do it once more later on to try and save face maybe. But that's not his game. Like, and if you want to get something out of him, he appears from, like, I'm not bitter, I don't know the guy, but he appears to be the kind of player that's like, build the team around me and make me the star, and I will do it. But if you're going to throw me out on left wing, I'll do bits. Like, so I don't. That's what it feels like watching the games. And Caden Mayan-Perot was just left with Dana Luke and Josh Hearn running at him at times, and the players are having to come across and they like to help out, and it's so difficult for him there. He's not a left midfielder. He's a number 10. And if you're not gonna use him in that in that position, and if you're not gonna try and play things through him, then would you put him on the pitch? Would you be playing him as a left winger?
No, I wouldn't. I feel like his quality demands him to be on the pitch, but at the same time, if you're not going to utilize him properly, a player like Mo Babuli, it's like the things that he can do make up for the things that he can't. But you have to be able to play him in the positions where they actually outweigh each other. I feel like if you put him on the wing, the things he can't do kind of start to outweigh the things that he can do, especially since already you're having injuries in the defense, and your defense is not as strong as you want to be. So you want to have as much cover out wide and in the middle as you can. And so you want to have players that can track back and help out, and he's not really one of them. So yeah, it's a tough one because Mo Babuli can be so influential, and we know how passionate he can be, and we know some of the issues that he can have on the disciplinary side. But you still want him to be, confident. You still want him to be, having that end product, because he's a player that can push you to be a better team almost all by himself. And the fact that once again we saw a game where it really wasn't that, and he wasn't playing in those positions and being able to turn the game as we've come to expect him being able to do, both in York United and also when we saw him with Forge, it's a little bit of a concern. And I think Martin Nash needs to be able to find a way to better bring in a Mo Babuli and better balance the attack as a whole. Because go ahead.
I just said that's what I think the big problem is. That I don't think Martin Nash has last season it showed he didn't know how to get the best out of him as a number 10. Like he's just tried something completely different rather than trying to change the way the team are playing and using Babuli in that position. He's just tried to put him somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think it's a problem in and of itself, but I think it also ties into a greater problem with York United, which is like this game was a prime example. They're just not starting games quick enough. They're not starting games off on the front foot. We've seen it not just in this game, but in a couple of other games against Forge twice. Forge just starts so strong against you, and if you allow them to get 1-2 goals up, you're never going to be able to recover. No matter how well you sort of wake up in the second half. And it was the same sort of thing where it's like were just like a little bit. They're just a little slow, sleepy from the beginning, and I don't know if that's necessarily like a mental thing, or if that's something that's on the players, or if it's more on Martin Nash. But I think that's their biggest weakness right now. They've shown that they can be dangerous. They've shown that they can score goals. But the fact that there's a lack of balance, and the fact that there's a lack of urgency in the opening stages, I think is probably one of the things that Martin Nash is going to really have to look after if he wants his York side to improve.
Yeah, no, they do. There's just something needs to change in this team now. It's just not quite working out. They had some really nice performances from like Higgins and Abatne to start with. That was not the perfect games, but they showed that they could cover for these when getting thrown in when they covering for injury. And Brian Wright showing what he can do, and like you got Sumaru back, and there's things there, but it's just at the moment it feels like it's down on the manager. Like what he's sending his team out to do isn't really working.
Yeah. Yeah, thankfully for them, though, they have a good match for the next week to fix things, which is when they host Valor at home. Maybe a great opportunity for them to get back on track. While Pacific have a very tough couple of games now going up. I mean, we're going to see they have a really resolute defense right now. We're going to really see it get tested as Wednesday they face Atletico Ottawa in the Canadian Championship, and then just a few days later they host Forge at Starlight Stadium as well, and then next Friday they host Atletico Ottawa once again. So two of the other top flying teams right now. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Pacific get on. But I feel like those are going to be some very, very stellar matches to watch. So keep an eye out on those. We're now going to move on to the third match, the third and final match, Atletico Ottawa against Valour FC. And it wasn't the 7-0 drubbing that we saw in the midweek, though I am sure that Phil Dos Santos has woke up in the middle of the night before, just in a cold sweat, having nightmares about that 7-0. I guess in some sense, thankfully for him and for Valor fans and for our dear Mike, it wasn't another 7-0.
Yeah.
Was it because of Valor improving, or was it because Ottawa sort of just got the 2 and put their foot off the pedal? It might be a bit of both, but at least it wasn't the 7-0. Let's start with Ottawa first, and then we can move on to Valor. It was a hot start for Ottawa. Again, they scored within 20 minutes. Ruben Del Campo. I guess you could say it was another sort of avoidable goal, game off a set piece.
That's really
Silly
kind.
foul. Yeah. I'm trying to,
really tactful.
Yeah, I'm trying to be a little tactful around Valor, especially since I know that you probably will not. But yeah, within 32 minutes, it was already 2-0 up for Ottawa, and I genuinely thought it was like, oh God, here we go again. Not again. But both of the goals, just really poor positioning from the Valor's defense. You have the way that they were setting up the first goal again off a set piece, statues again. Ruben Del Capo comes in. Gabriel Antonoro's goal in the 32nd minute. Zachary Secunda is picking flowers in his head. He's in his happy place as Antonoro just sneaks out behind him and puts it away for 2-0. Ottawa, again, it's another case where it's like it's a good performance, but how much of it is it actually a good performance by them? And just the fact that they're just playing a team in Valor that just they're constantly switching off, they're constantly shooting themselves in the foot, and Ottawa are just kind of strolling by them, not really getting past second or third gear, because Ottawa were like, we just played you and pumped you 7-0. We got to focus on Pacific on Wednesday. We're not going to go for the same sort of thing. So it really felt like it was like, who wants to score? Do you want to score, or do I want to score? But yeah, Ottawa, again, really strong first half, dominated the first half. I feel like it's a performance that they can be proud of. But for you, did you make it more of Ottawa being good or Valor being bad?
I mean, I think Ottawa were good. Like I don't want to take too much away from them because they scored 9 goals in a week against the Valor. I mean, it is mad. Like, and you've got their Debrian and then Tenoro there. I thought they were fantastic. Debrian and Twardek are so aggressive and so direct that it gives, in this case, Antinoro and Tabla the chance to just pick and choose where they want to make their moves and where they want to make their runs. Because both fullbacks are playing almost like wingers in possession, and they'll both go down the flanks, but they'll both cut in depending on, and it's starting to build up a bit of chemistry with the wingers as well to know, like, okay, right, they're drifting out wide. I'm gonna make the underlap and go into the hole, or okay, they're moving in and they're trying to pick up spaces in between defenders. I'm gonna carry on down the line and get to the end. like it's really difficult to play against. But they did, like, by the time Antinoro's goal embarrassingly went in. I mean, it was embarrassing. Like, it just felt like both teams got to that point where they were just like, I really can't be bothered with this. We know what the result's going to be. Like, let's just save ourselves a little bit of hassle. Should we call it here?
Yeah, I think it genuinely was that. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Carlos Gonzalez at halftime was like, all right, we've won this match. Just don't be complacent. Don't let them back in, but don't stress yourselves out on getting the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and maybe 8th. Let's just game manage now. And they did really well in terms of the game management. In the second half, they came out and again really didn't allow Valour many or any opportunities, and they just sort of, it almost felt like they were just, it was turned into a training session of just keep away between themselves and Valour, and just, I felt very pedestrian from Ottawa, because Valour didn't really offer much more in the attack.
Couldn't wait to get out of the capital. They just wanted to be gone. And what you're saying about the pedestrian side, like, it's no more, like, there is no more perfect example of this was the save of the game that One Soccer gave when Sean Hundle hit the target, and we just went down his throat. Makes a pretty standard save, but there weren't really any other saves to choose from, so they got lumped with that one. I think that really highlighted how neither side were really that bothered. Well, one side wasn't that bothered, and one side couldn't.
Yeah, it almost felt like it's in my mind. It felt like when you have like a big, like an older sibling and a younger sibling, the older sibling just holding the head of the younger sibling is trying to claw it, and the older sibling just can't be bothered, but just holding him at bay. That's what I imagined that second half was between Ottawa and Valour. One player that will be really happy in that game is Ruben Del Campo, because he is on hot form. He's my player of the week because he has 4 goals in 3 games. And the manner of the goal that he scored in this one, again, Valour weren't fantastic, but he just is exuding with confidence now. Ever since he got that first goal, he's been able to be better on his positioning, get on the end of his opportunities. And before last season, I think he went 16 games without a goal. Now we're seeing him actually take those opportunities and put them away. Last season, I think he was getting a little snake bitten. I think maybe it became a little bit mental in front of the goal, and he just couldn't put the ball into the back of the net. Now, this season, after Sam Saltner getting the start for the first 2 games, he's like, I want that to be me. And he impressed off the bench. He got the start. He impressed off the start. He's impressed in the last 3 games. And now with 4 goals, he's the certified striker, number 1 for Ottawa. And the fact that he is the one getting all the goals, despite all the stars being there, also shows that Ottawa aren't just a Hollywood team. They have players that might not have as flashy names, capable of performing to the level that Del Campo has. And I've been really, really impressed by the way that he has come in. Do you think he's a decent shout for maybe Golden Boot contender?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get caught up in the attacking opportunities that have been created in these last 2 games. But even before that, Ottawa has shown they can create opportunities a lot more than they did last season. So if you're a player in form that's getting to be in those positions, you're gonna get opportunity after opportunity with these players around you. And I mean, if he's going to continue this kind of form for the next few weeks, he's just going to keep on notching up goals.
Yeah, and I think the real test is, like you mentioned, when they don't face a Valour FC, when they're facing, they face Pacific twice in the next couple of weeks. I think that'll be where they can really see how much can they truly create. Can they be the first team to break Pacific FC's clean sheet? And will it be him to do that? I think that'll be a good test for both Ruben Del Campo and the team themselves. But for Valour, Valor. It went from bad to worse, honestly, because Viscosi went down in the second half, right after, or was it the first or the second half? I think it was
It was in the first. It was just after the second goal. Viscosi and Secunda came off, and I mean, Viscosi just kicked the ball out and just sat down. You could tell it was a muscle injury, I think, and that's going to be concerning. Good shout for like, I mean, Marasa Rwanwa must have been like, I can only imagine what was going through his head after midweek coming back on the pitch again, but did well, claimed the ball a few times, immediately got his hands on the ball, and it wasn't tested quite as much, but they did throw in a few crosses throughout the game, and he did come out and collect them, which he wasn't even doing in the midweek. And Secunda, like, he was hobbling off and sort of holding leg, but I don't know. I mean, that's the kind of thing I would have done. Like, he got that. It was very much that, yeah, I'm getting overrun here, and I don't really fancy this kind of game, kind of hobble off the pitch rather than an actual, has he got an injury?
Yeah. I feel like, Musa Ranwa did pretty well coming on. Obviously, conceding 7 goals isn't fantastic for his confidence. But if Viscosi is injured for a little while, he's going to have some pretty big shoes to fill, because as much as Viscosi, Valor haven't been great, Viscosi has gotten them out of trouble quite a few times. It could have been much worse without him there. So he's going to have to at least do a little bit of damage control if he has to take the mantle on for a few weeks. And then, Secunda, if it looked really bad, the fact that it was his fault that the second goal went in, and Phil Dos Santos said, you know what, you're coming off. Phil did say after the match that it was a tactical thing, that he wanted to get the best out of Dante Campbell, and it wasn't anything of like punishing the player, but it didn't look great. And it's unfortunate because Zachary Secunda, on the ball, in possession, is one of Valor's better players, putting those balls in. Maybe not as good as Temi Antonoglu has been, but still he's been more a little bit of a bright spot. But yeah, making a huge mistake like that and getting hooked off, that's gonna do some damage to your confidence.
Yeah, that was playground stuff. That was someone who's got put in right back, who isn't really all that keen on being there, who at that point was just thinking, oh, I really wish they had pizza for lunch instead of...
Yeah.
And everyone's shouting at him.
Exactly. It was not a pretty sight for him and for Valor. And the match ended. It was a routine victory, a comfortable victory for Ottawa. And putting up this graphic once again. Just looking at, it's a lot of red there. Just loss at the loss at the loss. 5 straight losses in this season. Just looking at the tally there, you have 4, 6, 8, 15, 16, 17 goals conceded. 2 scored. 17 goals conceded. 2 scored for Valour.
That's not championship form, is it?
No. I think they're a little ways off from challenging for the title on that one. But the question must be asked again: how much time does Phil Dos Santos have? Because losing 2-0 to a very strong Ottawa side in isolation isn't that big of a deal.
No.
But when you put the context into it, the fact that you conceded 9 goals to the same team in 1 week, in 2 different competitions, and you have yet to get a single point from the league, and you still have to wait until June to get a home match, so you have no reprieve, you're still traveling with a completely new squad. How much time does Phil Dos Santos have?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that much personally, but like, if I'm going to try and play devil's advocate, like, and just try and defend him in some kind of way, like, let's take out that 7-0 and we'll just focus on CPL. Like that, I mean, that was just atrocious, but there's put that to one side, and you look at the other games. So you've lost to Ottawa, yeah, that's going to happen. Like, you lost 2-1 to Forge, in which you did really well.
Probably deserved a draw.
Yeah, you lose 2-0 to Pacific, did pretty well in a lot of periods of that game. But Pacific, we look at them, they haven't conceded a goal all season. They're up there at the top of Forge. The 4-1 defeat, you can't blame the red card. They're already down. They're already down a couple of, was it 2-0? Sorry, 2-1 at that point when he went off.
I think it was even 3-1.
3-1, whereas, yeah. But Vancouver, they started off fantastically. So when you look at that, you said it earlier, like for York, like finally they get their Valour game to try and turn things around. But Valour must be looking at it and thinking, oh, finally, we're not playing someone who's going to be competing for a championship, or Vancouver on their best start, like probably their best performance of the season. So, like, if you're trying to defend Phil Dos Santos, I think you can look at that and say, I mean, it's not the kindest of starts, and maybe they've shown some bright sparks in games where, if you're playing a lesser side compared to the ones you've just faced, you might get something.
That's true. Yeah, look what Valour have done to you.
I'm really trying.
Yeah,
maybe it's not so much Valour, but Antonoglu is really like making me feel confident. And I really like Benate. I think he could really develop into being a decent player this year. Like, he showed
Benate is turning into the Canadian Darwin Nunez right now, where he's getting into those positions, but he just can't get the ball into the net. No, but I agree with you. I do think that it's very tough for a team that already has the lowest of expectations to face in the first 3 out of 4 matches, face the 3 strongest team in the league. If they would have faced York earlier, they would have faced maybe Halifax on their current form. It might have been different. So, yeah, I guess maybe there's still, there's some factors in there that you have to consider for how poor the start has been, but you can only stretch so far.
Yeah. I'm really like doing my best to like look at the pro Phil Dos Santos side, which it does feel like the owners are doing themselves as well.
Yeah, a lot of coping on that side. But yeah, we'll see if against York United they can turn it around and maybe show that they have something to offer to the league that can be competitive.
Yeah, that does make it a little bit more of an exciting game for me. Like, on paper it's probably not, but the fact that both these sides need something probably will add a little bit more chaos to the game and a bit more excitement.
Yeah, exactly. But that is it for our coverage of match day 4, just the 3 games once again. We'll move on to the power rankings, the updated one for match week 4. Before we do that though, Mike, did you say who your player of the week was?
I didn't actually. It was, but I mean, it probably wasn't too tough for anyone to guess with Wojciechowski. He's just been fantastic, and he's really, really looking confident. It's just an exciting player up there. Cavalry really needed that, I think, this season. It's been really exciting to watch.
Yeah, great shout, and like I mentioned myself, Del Campo. We really like goal scorers, huh? We really do.
Goals are pretty good. I like them.
Yeah, goals. they kind of make the game fun, don't they? But here are our updated power rankings for match week 4. As mentioned, Forge FC and Halifax Wanderers didn't really play. So because they didn't play, there wasn't but too much movement around. Forge stayed top, Pacific stay second, and Atletico Ottawa stay third. Not much to do there. The real movement was in the middle of the pack. Cavalry went up 1 to 4th. Vancouver FC, after losing that match, went down to 5th. York United stay 6th because at least they offered a little bit of a fight back in their match. Halifax Wanderers, even without playing, went up 1.
Did them a favor, didn't they?
Even kind of gave them a favor because they did play and they didn't lose. They went up 1 to 7th. Well, Valour FC, just because we're trying to not put Canadian Championship as CPL based only, but because they conceded 9 goals to Ottawa in 1 week, I feel like there's nowhere else we can put them. But
we did debate it, didn't we? And we sort of like those Like, yeah, Halifax didn't even play. How can they jump up a place? But I mean, also, like we were saying, like Ottawa sleptwalked into a 2-0 win. Like, so that doesn't look great on Valour, sadly. So yeah, I think they're going to need a really good performance against York to jump off the bottom spot.
Exactly. I think that's going to be a crucial match for them if they want to turn this thing around before they get their first home match. But that is it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials and let us know what you think about the episode. Did you agree with our takes? What about the power rankings? You think that is accurate? Let us know. And if you have a good response, we might shout you out on the next show. But until next time, I'm Philip Belgium.
And I'm Mike Wright.
And this is being